All right, this is iBSDe. This is the module for Google Sheets and learning how to use Google Sheets more effectively with what you're doing. I'm going to focus on SPED paras and using Google Sheets to help track some student data, maybe some behavioral data or some classwork data. We're going to get familiar with how to use Sheets and how to navigate it on your iPad. It is slightly different than using Google Sheets on the MacBook. And so you can kind of go a flip between the two, but just know that there's more features available to you through a laptop or a desktop computer. There's desktops all around the district, or maybe at home you have a laptop that you can use. But I'm going to focus this tutorial on using Google Sheets on your iPad. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to open this thing up and swipe over to Google Drive. And so for this module, you're going to create a new Google Sheet. And I'll step you through the whole process if you want to follow along. The first thing I'll do is I'll go into the folder where I want the sheet to be created. So I'm going to click on my 2016-17 folder and click the big blue button to create a new Google Sheet. That opens up Google Sheets app and it asks me to rename this. And so we're going to rename this one Practice Student Spreadsheet. And we'll hit create. So now this will create a new spreadsheet with the name at the top, Practice Student Spreadsheet. And on Sheets, I'm going to give you some quick navigational. I can swipe my finger to see the different rows. I can pinch to zoom out, and I can get a view of all the rows and columns. And I can pinch to zoom in to see each row and column in more detail, and again swiping up and down to scroll through the rows and the columns. Across the top you have an undo button and a redo button. You have a button to add collaborators, so this is great if you're collaborating with a teacher. You can add them as a collaborator and they can edit or comment, or they can just simply view. You can send them a short message when you add them as a collaborator. Okay. The next little button lets you insert comments onto the document itself into the individual cells. And then the last button, you notice I clicked the three dots. It's like the settings for this app. And it gives you additional settings for using Google Sheets. And so there's a few settings here if you're trying to find and replace lots of words, or if you want to view all the comments. This Explore tab gives you a new way to view if you have data in there, particularly numbers. It'll give you a quick way to try to write formulas for you. You can create filters. We'll talk about details and how we share and export. So this is how you'll turn this assignment in, is you'll share this assignment. You'll give it so that anybody can view this link, and then you'll turn the link into Canvas. What we're going to do is we're actually going to enter some data here and do some tracking of that data, and then write a couple formulas so you can see what this looks like. So the first column, it asks me to put in cell A1, which is column A, row 1, the student name. And so you can do this by selecting the row and then either clicking on the formula bar at the bottom, or you can double click to bring up the formula bar to edit it. And in this first cell, we're going to put student name. Once I've entered the name, you can click return and it will move your icon to the next row, or you can touch on the screen and move it over to B1. So in B1, we want to add the name class name, and in C1, we're going to enter has materials. We want to know if my student brought materials or if he did not bring materials, and I would like to actually capitalize that. There we go, has materials. The next one, I'm going to have on time to class. So is my student on time to class? And in row E, we are going to put is my student on task, and we're looking for like a percentage. What percentage were they on task today? And then maybe in this last column we're going to say any additional comments that I might have. So I'm going to click the blue checkbox, and that's going to have all of my data entered. I'm just pinch zooming to see each one of those. So the next thing that we're going to look at is entering the data for us to manipulate. So now that we have this first row, we're going to put in all the data, and I've given you the list of data on Canvas, and so go ahead and copy and paste that data into the field or type it all in. I've already typed it in ahead of time, and so I'm just going to paste this guy in, and now we have data to manipulate. So pause the video now and go enter that data, and then start the video back up when you're ready to go. All right, so we have row 1 is our header, if you will, and then we have data below that. John Wayne, he's a Western ELA class. He's got some material. He's on time to class, yes, and on task 70% of the time. And of course, this is just examples. In the additional comment field, I know that's going to be kind of long. So what I might actually do is I actually will want to widen this column out, and so you can see I just selected column F, and then I grabbed right at the edge of column F and I just drug it so it's wider. So when I type in comments, it's going to fill in that whole field there. Just I made column F, the width, I made it wider. For the on task one, I'm actually going to shrink that one up because it doesn't need to be so wide. Same with on time to class and has materials. I can shrink those up. So I can adjust the widths of my cells so that it just makes sense on the screen. And so when I'm looking at the screen, it looks a little more, it's easier to see with your eye. Let's go ahead also and select the entire row 1. And we're going to do some formatting here. And what formatting does is it gives pizzazz, and it lets your spreadsheet look a little bit nicer, and you can quickly reference items that are in the cell. So I'm going to select all of row 1. And I'm going to do that by clicking on the row 1 over here. And by doing that, it highlights, you see the row 1 is blue, and now it highlights all of that row. And so what I can do is make a header row. So I'm going to click the B button up top, and I just made that whole row bold. I can click the paint can, and I can choose a background, a text color for that row. So I'll find a fun text color. Let's say I'm going to go with blue. And I can also choose a fill color. So maybe I want the background to be, let's do a light orange with a blue text color. You can see the options here. And then the last thing I'm going to do, now that I have row 1, I'm going to select row 1 again. The last thing I can do is, is select row 1 and then tap on it. So select row 1 and then tap again, and it brings up the option to freeze the row. So I'm going to freeze row 1. I'm selecting in column B3 just to unselect row 1, and you can see now when I scroll up, row 1 stays frozen. Row 1 stays frozen. So that's really nice when you have lots of data and you want to know what the header says at the very bottom. Row 1 says frozen. You can do the same thing with column A. Select all of column A and then tap on it one more time and say freeze column. And now I have column A and row 1 frozen. So you'll see when I scroll over, column A and row 1 are frozen. So again, it's great when you have lots of data on the screen to be able to view all of that data. Of course, if you want to change the freezing, you can select column A and then say unfreeze column, and now column A is no longer frozen. But if you liked it frozen, we're going to go ahead and freeze column A, and now I have a nice frozen column A and a nice frozen row 1. So there's a couple things that we're doing. Next, we are going to talk about adding some color to these things. And so if you want, you can select a cell. Let's choose Bruno Mars on task. He's at 90%. And so if I want 90%, I can come here and make the fill color. I can change the fill color and say it's green. And if I want Nolan Ryan to be 90%, I can choose fill color, and there's my green again. So I can quickly see which ones are green, which ones are red. Maybe this Charlize Theron, 35%, I'm going to make her red. So I can see my highs and my lows. Unfortunately, you can't do a conditional format where it does that automatically for you. You can do that on the regular computer. On your iPad, you can just manually add that coloring to it. So one other piece then, so now that we've kind of got this data in here, this is a great way to add students. You can add their class name, you can mark if they're on task or not, on time or not, how much they're on task, and then enter any general comments. So a great way to keep track of those students. I want to show you another piece here. Let's select all of column 1, and let's insert a row after column 1. So I've just added another row there. And what we're going to do on this one is we're actually going to find the average. We're going to find the average on-task percentage for this entire set of kids. And so I'm going to put that average on-task percentage into column E, number 2. And so what we'll do is we'll select column E, number 2, and we'll come down and we'll click the little FX button in the bottom of the corner. And there's lots of functions that can be run inside of Google Sheets. We're going to go after a statistical function called average. So I clicked on statistical, I click on average, and then it asks me, well, what values do you want to average? So you can see the formula is equals average parentheses, and it asks for you what values. So what I'll do is I'll actually select John Wayne, and then I'll drag the right lower dot down to cover up E3 through E6. And then I'll go ahead and hit the blue checkbox, and now you can see that I have the average on taskness for this group of kids automatically calculates to 74%. So if I go in and change one of these averages, let's take 70%. Let's make it 79. When I make it 79, you can see the average bumped up to 76. So that average is automatically being calculated using rows 3 through 6 for column E. And we can do similar things if we want to count how many times we said yes in column D. We can do a similar thing. We can come into our functions for column D, and in this time we're going to use a mathematical function called count. And so we're going to say count if. We'll choose count if, and we're going to say count if. I'm going to drop this down. We're going to say count if. Hold up. So let's do this again. Count if, and it's asking for what range do you want to count. So I want to count if D3 through D6. I want to count D3 through D6 is equal to yes. And so to do the criterion is yes, I'm going to do a quotation, yes, quotation. And then I'm going to close the parentheses. So my function is count if D3 through D6 is equal to yes. And if it's equal to yes, I'll hit the blue check mark. If it's equal to yes, then it's going to count how many times it's equal to yes. And in this case, there are 3 yeses inside of my columns. So if I change D3 to say no or anything else, you can see my yes count goes down by 1. And if I change it back to say yes, it goes back up to 3. So it's a great way to be able to quickly count if values are equal to a certain criteria. And again, this function was count if. I use the equal sign, count if, parentheses D3 through D6 is equal to, quote, yes, end quote, end parentheses. And now I'm counting how many cells are equal to yes. All right, so we've just set up a nice tracking Google spreadsheet for maybe an entire class or when you have several students. The next thing we're going to do is actually create a second sheet that's inside of that workbook, and we're going to dedicate it to an individual student, and we're going to track a few things like maybe their behavior, their effort, their academics. We'll give them a rating of 1, 2, or 3, and then we'll calculate an overall score by writing a formula that says overall score, and then we'll write an average score. And that way, you might use this if you're working with an individual student over several class periods, and you just want to calculate, what was their average score, what was their overall score for those categories. So let me show you how to do that. Go ahead and follow along. I'm back in that same spreadsheet that we had just created, and I just zoomed out a little bit. Since I'm currently on a cell, I'm going to hit the blue check button at the top, and you'll notice at the very bottom it says Sheet 1. So in this workbook we have one sheet here. I'm going to add a second sheet so I can dedicate it to an individual student. So I hit the plus button in the right hand lower corner, and that creates a brand new blank sheet from me. You notice the Sheet 2 is now dark. You can toggle between Sheet 1 and Sheet 2 by clicking on it, and you'll be able to jump between those two sheets. And so here what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create this sheet, dedicate it to the student Bruno Mars. So let's go ahead and select Bruno Mars, and if you select once and then select again, you'll bring up the pop-up. You can say copy, and then hit the blue button and hit the Sheet 2, and let's go ahead and paste Bruno Mars into the A1 cell. So you select the cell once and then you tap it one more time. Don't double tap because that will edit it. So now we have a sheet for Bruno Mars. In B1 we can double tap this, we're going to write the word date. In C1 we're going to write rating for, and we'll do this one for behavior. So I guess I could have just said behavior. In D1, we're going to write the rating for effort. In E1, we'll do rating for academics. In F1, we're going to put in the overall score. And in G1, we're going to do the average score. So we've created our header row. Let's do like we did before. Let's click on the number 1, the row number 1, so we can select the whole row. Click the paint can, click fill color, and let's make this, let's make it a nice soft red. Excellent. And with the row 1 still highlighted, let's click on the bold button, and we'll even italicize it a little bit. So here we have, for Bruno Mars, we have a date column, and then we have the ratings, and then we have the overall score, and we have the average score. To make this look a little neater, let's take overall score, the whole column F. Let's select the whole column F, and let's give that a nice soft blue. So I'll do a light blue for overall score, and for the average score, let's give that a nice soft green. So we have a nice blue, we have a green and a blue for overall and average. Excellent. So now we're going to enter some data for this student. And I know this column B is going to be dates. And so I'm going to teach you guys real quick about making cells, formatting cells to be able to display the content that you would like. And since we're doing a date here, let me first select column B, and I'm actually going to just shrink it up a little bit by clicking and dragging in between B and C. And the next thing, with column B totally selected, I'm going to click on the little format bar button, which is a little A with 3 lines on it up top here. And clicking on that format button brings up other formats for this column. You can adjust the size or the text color or the style of font that you want to use. If you click on the cell, it lets you adjust some of the cell properties, and you'll notice one of those cell properties is number format. If you select that number format option, it brings up different formats for that cell. And since we're doing a date format, I'm going to scroll down till I see date. And there are several options for the date for this column, except for the one I'm looking for is not shown. And so I'm going to click on more date time formats and actually scroll down till I find the format I'm looking for. The one I'm looking for says the date, the 26th of September. So it has the day and the month. I like that format when I'm dealing with dates. I do this so you can see that there are other options when you're entering data into cells. So let's go ahead and select off of there. And for Bruno Mars, let's give it a date. So let's give today's date, November 8th. And I can select C2. And notice the format now for the date is 8-November. Excellent. So let's go ahead and enter some values for Bruno Mars. So on November 8th, let's say he got a 2 for behavior, he got a 3 for effort, he got a 2 for academics. Excellent. 2, 3, and 2. And then let's enter November 9th, which is tomorrow. So November 9th. And notice I entered that differently, but it still put it in the right format to display the format that I selected initially. So let's say he had a 1 for behavior, a 3 for effort, and a 3 for ratings, which doesn't totally make sense, but he gave a good effort. He just wasn't acting well. So now that we have some data for our ratings, we're going to go ahead and write those formulas for the overall score and the average. And then I'm going to show you how to copy that formula and drag it down so that it picks up all of the scores. So to write the formula, I select the cell I want the formula to go into, in this case the overall score. And we're going to go ahead and click on the formula option. In this case, we want to do let me go back. We want to sum all of these values, 2, 3, and 2, and add those up for the overall score here in overall score. And so I'm going to show you how to actually write this code instead of finding it. So to write the code, let's go to F2, click equals sum, S-U-M, and you can see as you start typing the formulas pop up right below it. We want to use the sum one, S-U-M. We're going to sum, and it asks for what values do you want to sum. And so we're going to enter the values inside the parentheses for the ones we want to sum. In this case, we want to sum C, D, and E. So I'm going to click on C and then drag the little dot on the right-hand side across D and E. And so now I'm summing values C2, D2, and E2. And the output is going to go into F2. Go ahead and hit enter. Boom. 7 points. You see that? 7 points. Automatic formula there. Now what's really nifty with Sheets is I can take that formula and I can actually copy that formula right here. I can copy that and I can actually paste that formula into the next cell down. And what's really cool is that it will update for the new row. It just so happened that I actually gave it a value of 7 as well. So let's change this so you can see what I'm talking about. Let's make this a 1 and let's make this a 1. You notice now on November 9th he got a 111 for a total of 3 points, and on November 8th he got a 232 for a total of 7 points. So you can see this is actually updating automatically the formula. And we can do the same thing, but we're going to do an average score. So do you remember earlier in the video I showed you how to do the average? Let's go ahead and do that again. So I'm going to write a formula. I'm going to click equals, and I want to do average. This time I'm just going to start typing average because I remember I used it earlier. As I start typing average, the first formula is called average. I select it. Which values do you want to average? I want C2 through E2. I hit enter, and the average is a score of 2.33. Let's go ahead and select the cell G2. Let's copy it and let's paste that into G3. Boom. The average for November 9th is 1. So there you have it, guys. You have a single student. You're marking individual days. You're giving them a quick rating. You're doing a formula to calculate the total score, and then a formula to calculate the average score. Before we conclude, I want to show you one other piece, because you notice this 2.33, the decimal goes on forever. So we can reduce that decimal by opening up, selecting the whole of G, the whole row, column G, click the formatting option, and under the cell option, so not the text option, but the cell option, you can tell it how many decimal places you would like for it to round to. And so in this case, we're going to go down to, let's just say 2 decimal places. 2 decimal places, and now you can see that all of my scores are rounded to the second decimal place. And I hope you had a good time learning about how to manipulate Google Sheets on your iPad and to do some student tracking. And we created 2 different sheets, one for maybe an overall class and one for an individual student. We learned how to freeze the rows and the columns. We learned how to highlight rows to change the colors of rows. We learned how to change the background colors on certain cells. We also learned how to write formulas like count if something equals yes, or to write the formula for average. We also, on sheet 2, learned how to format the cell to display a certain date. We did a sum formula. We did an average formula. We also formatted the color. We've done quite a bit for the training on Sheets, and I hope this training has done a good tutorial for you in learning how to use Google Sheets, and you to start harnessing these sheets to help you in your role. By all means, if you have questions, shoot me those questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. And now that you're done with that, what you're going to do, let me walk you through how to share this as the assignment back to Canvas. So here's what you do. You open up your sheet. All right. So go to your 3 buttons, click on Share Export, click Copy Link to Clipboard. Now that it's copied, you can go into your Canvas assignment and find this assignment in Canvas and click on the Submit button, click Turn In. It's going to ask you for the URL. Wherever it asks you for the URL, you can paste that URL and submit it. All right, thanks for watching, and we'll see you online.